Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be my most anticipated releases for June of 2022. June in terms of anticipated releases for me is definitely a month where I feel like I have a lot of books that are typical genres of mine as well as books that are really out of my comfort zone but I'm still very interested in. So definitely going to be a very interesting month for new book releases. As always, when I'm talking about these new books, I will have a picture of the cover on the screen with me as well as the release date for this book, so I will also have all of the information for all the books listed down below. If I missed any books that you are really looking forward to checking out that come out in the month of June, definitely leave them down below, but let's just go ahead and get started. I have a lot of really exciting books to talk to you all about. First up on my list, coming out June 7th, is going to be Garden of Earthly Bodies by Sally Oliver. This one is an exquisitely eerie and unsettling speculative novel that grapples with questions of trauma, identity, and the workings of memory. Months after her sister's death, Marianne wakes up to find a growth of thick black hairs along her spine. They defy her attempts to remove them. The hairs, Marianne's doctor tells her, are a reaction to trauma developed in the wake of the loss of her sister Marie. Her doctor recommends that Marianne visits Need, a modern New Age rehabilitation center in a remote forest in Wales, where the patients attend unorthodox therapy sessions and commune with nature. Yet something strange is happening to Marianne and the other patients at Need, a metamorphosis of a kind. As the hairs on her back continue to grow, the past starts to entangle itself with the present, and the borders of her consciousness threaten to disintegrate. Haunting, lyrical, and introspective, Garden of Earthly Bodies is a startlingly accomplished and original debut about the bond between two sisters, love and its limits, and our inability to ever truly know the minds of others. So this one just sounds very strange, very fascinating. I definitely have been enjoying almost books that are just like so strange you don't really know what's happening throughout them. Like I read Vita Nostra earlier this year and I absolutely loved it. I feel like that also kind of had some weird literary body horror within it. This kind of sounds like some of the same, so I'm very interested. Also, I really love complicated sister dynamics in books as well, or really just any sister dynamic, but that is a premise that really calls to me. So this one just sounds eerie and unsettling. I feel like the blurb did it justice, but intrigued to check that one out and kind of see more. I don't know if it's kind of like literary horror or horror. I don't know how much like the fantastical elements will kind of come to play into this one, but definitely sounds very intriguing. Next up, we have a book that also comes out June 7th. That would be Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro. This is the first in the Talents trilogy, and this is a stunning new work of historical fantasy. It introduces readers to the dark labyrinth world of the Talents. This takes place in England in 1882, in Victorian London. I love all of that. All of those are buzzwords for me. Two children with mysterious powers are hunted by a figure of darkness, a man made of smoke. So our two main characters, Charlie and Marlowe, both kind of have what seems like superpowers. There's an eerie estate outside of Edinburgh where children with gifts, the Talents, have been gathered. And there's just like a magical institute. Sounds like kind of like a Victorian England version of X-Men almost. With lush prose, mesmerizing world building, and a gripping plot, Ordinary Monsters presents a catastrophic vision of the Victorian world and of the gifted broken children who must save it. I'm pretty sure I first heard about this one through Samantha Shannon's Instagram. Highly recommend, if you can, following your favorite authors on social media, because generally, not all the time, but generally the books that they love, since you love them as an author, you'll probably love them too, especially if they say that like their work is similar in any way or inspired by. Like that's a good way to find classics, I've found. And then for new releases, just really finding the authors that not just write blurbs for other authors, but continuously talk about the author and their work in like a very organic way. I feel like you can tell sometimes which authors are just like, obviously this is not a bad thing, but being just nice and professionally courteous to other authors and saying, hey, you should go check out this book, as opposed to seeing them read this book, become obsessed with this book, not just as an author and as a writing professional, but as a reader. So I would highly recommend that. That's how I find a lot of my new releases and put them on my radar, is actually other authors. Next up, coming out June 14th, we have Not Good for Maidens by Tori Bovalino. This one, I definitely haven't heard anything other than the blurb because it sold me so fast. Salem's Lot meets the darkest part of the forest in this horror fantasy retelling of the Goblin Market. Salem's Lot is one of my favorite Stephen King books, but not just favorite Stephen King books, it's also like one of my favorite kind of horror books. It's one of the books that really reminds me of fall. It's one of my favorite vampire stories. So I hear Salem's Lot, I cross my fingers hoping that it's an accurate blurb, and I check out the book. So I have heard great things about this author as well. Her last release was on my radar for last year. I still have not gotten a chance to pick it up yet, but I'm really hoping to. Heard great things. Definitely, I don't know too much about the Goblin Market and kind of that sphere of fantasy, but I'm very intrigued and eager to pick this book up and learn more. Next up, coming out June 21st, we have The Sleepless by Victor Manibo, and this one I believe is a thriller, and it really gives me the vibes of Blake Crouch almost in terms of synopsis. So we're following journalist Jamie Vega. He's sleepless, he can't sleep, nor does he need to. When his boss dies on the eve of a controversial corporate takeover, Jamie doesn't buy the too convenient explanation of suicide and launches an investigation of his own. But everything goes awry when Jamie discovers he was the last person who saw Simon alive. Not only do the police suspect him, but Jamie does not have any memory of that night. Alarmingly, his memory loss may have to do with how he became sleepless, not naturally like other sleepless people, but through a risky and illegal biohacking process. As Jamie delves deeper into Simon's final days, he tangles with extremist organizations and powerful corporate interests, all while confronting past traumas and unforeseen consequences of his medical experimentation. But Jamie soon faces the most dangerous decision of all, as he uncovers a terrifying truth about sleeplessness that imperils him and all of humanity. So in the synopsis, sleeplessness is always capitalized, so I believe it's some sort of not just condition how we have here when we're like, oh, we have insomnia or we're sleepless or we're suffering with sleep, but I think this is something where in this world some people literally do not sleep anymore. So very interested. I kind of love a good sci-fi twist, a very like mystical, interesting twist in a thriller that always calls me, it's giving me Blake Crouch vibes, and Blake Crouch is a very reliable thriller writer for me, so I'm intrigued. Next up, also coming out the 21st, we have Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. This is a gothic horror retelling of the Juniper tree, where a young witch seeks to discover her identity and escape the domination of her wizard father, perfect for fans of Shirley Jackson and Catherine M. Valenti. Now, this is an author who has written YA before. She's made it very clear that this is an adult book, so just know that going in. I think this is going to be very, very grimdark, and I think it's going to have some dark things in here, so probably, hopefully, there'll be like a list of trigger warnings when this book comes out. Gothic horror, also has like fantastical elements, also looks like we're following sisters in here as well, with some family sister dynamics aspects in here. Very intrigued. I've heard good things about Ava Reid. Personally, as I move closer and closer to 30, I've just kind of been phasing out of YA, just choosing not to pick it up and prioritizing adult stories. Not saying I won't pick it up if I'm interested in YA, but definitely I have noticed that I just resonate with adult more, and I generally tend to enjoy adult stories more. Nothing against YA, just personal preference at this point in time. So I haven't picked up this author. I've heard great things about this author. I feel like this is a perfect jumping off point to this author, and I just love gothic horror. I love gothic fantasy, so very eager to check this out. Another fantasy on my list, this one also comes out the 21st, and I know for a fact that Samantha Shannon has been talking nonstop nonstop about this one, and that is going to be the final Strife book 1 in the final Strife trilogy by Saara El-Arifi, and this is the first book of a visionary fantasy trilogy with its roots in the mythology of Africa and Arabia that sings of rebellion, love, and the courage it takes to stand up to tyranny. 3 women band together against a cruel empire that divides people by blood. I love fantasy. I've been reading fantasy for a long time. Generally, it's very hard for me to read a synopsis of a fantasy book other than like the very basic blurb and kind of understand what's going on. I feel like then after having read it and understanding and knowing what like all the place names are, like the magic system, more things like that, then it's easier for me to give a synopsis. So I'm not gonna read the full synopsis, but I am very, very excited about this one. I've heard a lot of buzz about this in fantasy circles. Like I mentioned before, Samantha Shannon has been loving this book, and I really, really love Samantha Shannon's writing, so I'm very intrigued to pick this up. It sounds like it's going to be so good. I love epic fantasy. This just sounds like it's going to have some really, really cool takes, really cool magic systems, so definitely looking forward to picking this one up. And last but not least, coming out on June 28th, we have Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. Right off the bat, the cover and the title of this book really drew me in. I was very just intrigued to see what this was about. Also, I saw that this was the author of Real Queer America, and I had seen it on several lists for queer books, so I was intrigued. I checked out the synopsis. I'm very, very interested to pick this up because it sounds so interesting. So the contestants of a reality television dating show compete for love and their lives in this pulse-pounding and viciously funny fiction debut from the GLAAD award-winning author of Real Queer America. When the final 4 women in competition for an aloof, if somewhat sleazy bachelor's heart arrive on a mysterious island in the Pacific Northwest, they mentally prepare themselves for another week of extreme sleep deprivation, invasive interviews, and of course the salacious drama that viewers nationwide tune in each week to eagerly devour. Each woman came on the catch for her own reasons, brand sponsorships, followers, and yes, even love, and they've got their eyes steadfastly trained on their respective prizes. So this is a whirlwind romp careening towards a last girl standing conclusion and a scathing indictment of contemporary American media culture. Patricia Wants to Cuddle is a love story between star-crossed lesbians who rise above their intolerant town, a deeply ambivalent woman and her budding self-actualization, and a chosen family of misfit islanders forging community against all odds. I have heard this also described as like a horror comedy, so I'm really intrigued. This is not something at all like what I normally read, but I've been seeing from early reviews that this is really good, and it's the cover and the name really pulled me in. I'm interested. I'd also like to point out the top review on Goodreads right now is a 5-star review that says this was insane in the best way. I'm obsessed. So yes, I am very much looking forward to this one. Definitely way out of my comfort zone. While I do like horror, I don't think I've actually read a lot of horror comedy. I have watched horror comedy and enjoy it, but I haven't read a lot of horror comedy. And yeah, this just seems like a wild time, so I'm interested. But there you have it. Those are the books that I am most looking forward to checking out that come out in June. If you have books to add to this list, definitely leave them down below. But that is going to be the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel for more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!